The police officer looked at me for a long second before asking quietly, "Mrs. Harper, are you absolutely certain you don't know anyone named Daniel Brooks?" I tightened my grip around my daughter's tiny blanket. Emily had finally fallen asleep against my shoulder after crying herself exhausted, her little fingers still wrapped around the sleeve of my worn sweater. "No," I whispered, "should I?" He exchanged a glance with the woman standing beside him. She lowered her voice. "Then this story is much bigger than you realize. My name is Claire Harper. I'm 32 years old, and until 5 days before that conversation, I believed the worst thing that could happen to a woman was watching the father of her child throw her into the freezing November rain with nowhere to go. I was wrong, because that night was only the beginning. But this story does not start there. Welcome back to Revenge Cold Stories. Before we go any further, drop your first name and your city in the comments, subscribe to the channel and settle in, because tonight's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the quiet moment when people finally discover the value they spent years ignoring. I grew up believing that stability was something you built one careful decision at a time. My father repaired elevators for 36 years. He never earned more than $68,000 in a year. My mother worked mornings at the public library and evenings, helping elderly neighbors organize paperwork for a little extra income. We never had much. Our 3-bedroom house measured barely 1,400 square feet. The wallpaper peeled every winter. The roof leaked exactly twice every spring. Yet somehow I never felt poor. My father had one saying, "Money doesn't keep families together, character does." At 12 years old, I believed him completely. At 32, I understood how complicated that sentence really was. I was the oldest of 2 sisters. My younger sister, Megan, was the beautiful one. Teachers noticed her first. Relatives bought her slightly nicer birthday presents. Even photographers at family gatherings somehow placed her in the middle. No one openly admitted it. They didn't have to. Children notice those things long before adults think they do. I wasn't jealous. I simply learned early that my value had to come from reliability, instead of attention. When I was 14, our father injured his back carrying equipment down 4 flights of stairs after an elevator malfunctioned. The doctors ordered 6 months of recovery. Our family income disappeared almost overnight. I remember sitting at the kitchen table watching my mother silently calculate bills, using an old yellow calculator with several missing buttons. She thought I wasn't looking. She cried only once. Quietly. Into her coffee. The next morning I woke up an hour earlier than usual. Before school, I delivered newspapers around our neighborhood. 36 houses. Every morning. Rain, snow, summer heat. For 23 months. No one asked me to. It simply felt necessary. That became my roles. The dependable one. The invisible one. The one who solved problems before anyone noticed they existed. Years later, when relatives praised Megan for becoming a fashion consultant, nobody remembered who had quietly paid for half her community college textbooks using money earned from after-school jobs. I didn't remind them. Keeping score isn't love. At least that's what I believed back then. After graduating from college with a degree in accounting, I joined a regional logistics company. Starting salary, $43,000. Nothing extraordinary. But every year I accepted additional responsibilities. Inventory audits, payroll reviews, compliance reports. Within 7 years, I became Senior Financial Operations Manager. Salary, $94,000. More importantly, my department reduced operating losses by 19% across 4 consecutive years. Numbers made sense. People didn't always. That was where Ethan entered my life. He was charming in the effortless way some people seem born to be. Tall, confident, funny. He could make strangers laugh within 2 minutes. The first time we met, He spilled coffee on his own shirt while trying to impress me. Instead of pretending it hadn't happened, he laughed so hard that everyone around us laughed too. I remember thinking, life might finally become lighter. He worked in residential construction. Hard worker. Strong hands. Good smile. He wasn't rich. Neither was I. That never mattered. For the first 2 years, he truly was the man I thought I'd spend forever with. He surprised me with handwritten notes. He remembered anniversaries. He called my mother just to ask how she was feeling after knee surgery. When he proposed beside Lake Hamilton during sunset, I said yes before he even finished asking. Looking back, I don't think he lied then. I think he changed. Or perhaps life slowly revealed pieces of him that love had hidden from me. After we married, construction projects became inconsistent. Sometimes he worked 60 hours a week. Sometimes 15. The uncertainty frustrated him. Meanwhile, my career kept growing. Raises, bonuses, professional certifications. At first he celebrated every success. Later, he joked about them. You accountants think spreadsheets can solve everything. He smiled when he said it. So I smiled too. Then the jokes changed. You probably think you're smarter because you wear office clothes. Still smiling. Always smiling. People often mistake humor for harmlessness. Sometimes jokes are simply insults wearing comfortable clothes. When Emily was born, everything shifted again. Holding my daughter for the first time remains the single most peaceful memory of my entire life. 7 pounds. 3 ounces. Tiny dark hair. The loudest cry I'd ever heard. I promised her something while everyone else celebrated around us. No matter what happens, you'll always have one safe place. I had no idea how soon that promise would be tested. Parenthood affected Ethan differently. For the first month he was attentive. Changing diapers. Rocking Emily to sleep. Taking hundreds of photos. Then work slowed again. Stress increased. Beer after dinner became whiskey before dinner. Weekend drinking became weekday drinking. Little disappointments became excuses. He never hit me. People hear stories like mine and immediately wonder about violence. No, his weapon wasn't his fists. It was unpredictability. Some evenings he'd bring flowers. Other evenings he'd ignore us completely. Sometimes he'd cry, apologizing. Other nights he'd insist everyone else caused his problems. Living with uncertainty is exhausting in ways bruises can't explain. My mother noticed first. Claire, is everything all right? I smiled. He's just stressed. She nodded. She wanted to believe me. Parents often accept the explanations their children desperately want to be true. One Saturday afternoon, Emily had just learned how to clap. She laughed every time I clapped first. Again, again, again. Her joy filled the living room. Ethan walked in carrying a six-pack. After watching us for maybe 20 seconds, he muttered, "Must be nice wasting all day." He wasn't speaking loudly. That's what hurt. It sounded casual. Like commenting on the weather. I looked at him. I've been cleaning since 6 this morning. He shrugged. You sit in an office all week, you don't know what real work feels like. Then he walked upstairs, leaving silence behind him. Emily reached toward the staircase. Still smiling. Too young to understand that adults can slowly become strangers while living under the same roof. That sentence stayed with me for months. You don't know what real work feels like. Interesting. Because my salary paid 72% of our household expenses that year. Mortgage, insurance, groceries, utilities, childcare savings. I never mentioned percentages. Marriage isn't supposed to be accounting. At least not emotionally. But facts exist whether people acknowledge them or not. The drinking continued. His frustration deepened. Yet every apology sounded sincere enough to make leaving feel premature. Until the night everything finally collapsed. It was Friday, November 11th. Cold enough that frost covered parked cars before midnight. Emily had been unusually fussy because of another ear infection. By 10:30 she finally fell asleep. I made tea, answered 2 work emails, folded laundry. Simple, ordinary things. At exactly 11:03 p.m. headlights swept across our living room curtains. I looked outside. Ethan's truck zigzagged slightly before stopping halfway across the driveway. My stomach tightened immediately. He stumbled through the front door. The smell hit first. Whiskey, strong enough to fill the hallway. He slammed the door so hard that Emily woke upstairs crying. Seriously, he shouted. Can't anyone in this house stay quiet? I hurried upstairs before Emily became frightened. When I carried her back down wrapped in her pink blanket, Ethan was standing in the kitchen drinking straight from another bottle. His eyes looked empty. Not angry. Empty. Sometimes that's worse. He stared at us, then laughed. A slow, tired, cruel laugh. You know what? I didn't answer. I said, you know what? What, Ethan? This isn't my life anymore. I remained silent. He pointed toward the front door. Get out. I honestly thought I'd misheard him. What? You heard me. Ethan. I said get out of my house. Our house. No. He slammed the bottle onto the counter. My house. Emily started crying again. I instinctively rocked her closer. He pointed at the door once more. You and the kid, out. I stared at him. He looked directly at our daughter before saying the sentence that still echoes in my mind. I don't care where you go tonight. To be continued. I searched his face for some sign that this was another terrible joke, another drunken outburst that would dissolve into tears and apologies by morning. There was nothing. His expression was flat, detached, almost impatient, as if he were waiting for a delivery driver instead of forcing his wife and 1-year-old daughter out into the cold. Ethan, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady so Emily wouldn't become even more frightened. It's almost midnight. I know how to read a clock. It's 29 degrees outside. Then you'd better wear a coat. I blinked. For a second, I couldn't process that someone I had loved for 7 years could answer so casually. Emily buried her face against my neck. She always sensed tension before anyone raised their voice. Children notice emotional weather long before adults do. I'll sleep in the guest room, I offered. We can talk tomorrow. I don't want to talk tomorrow. He took another drink. I want the house empty tonight. There was no screaming. No dramatic argument. Just those calm, cold sentences. Sometimes the quietest cruelty leaves the deepest scars. I carried Emily upstairs without another word. Inside her room, I sat on the rocking chair for nearly 30 seconds. Not because I was giving up. Because my mind simply stopped working. Every plan I had for the next 10 years disappeared in less than 5 minutes. I packed a diaper bag. 6 diapers. 1 container of formula. 3 bottles. Her favorite stuffed rabbit. 2 changes of clothes. Baby medicine. Wipes. I packed automatically, like someone following instructions. Then I walked into our bedroom. Half of everything in that room belonged to me. The furniture. The curtains. The mattress we'd spent weeks choosing. The wedding picture hanging above the dresser. I looked at it for a long time. 2 smiling people. Neither of them knew where the story would end. I didn't take the photograph. Some memories become too heavy to carry. When I opened the closet, I reached for my winter coat. Ethan appeared in the doorway. "You've got 5 minutes. I just need a suitcase." "No." "What do you mean, no?" "You take what you're carrying." "Ethan, my clothes are here." "You'll figure it out." I looked at him. "Are you listening to yourself?" He shrugged. "I've listened to everybody else for years." There it was. Not alcohol. Resentment. The drinking had simply unlocked words he had been storing for months. "I supported us." "I never asked you to." "You didn't have to." "I never wanted my wife making me look useless." I stared at him. For the first time, I understood that my success had become part of his pain. Not because I had done anything wrong. Because every promotion reminded him of everything he believed he wasn't. That realization didn't excuse him. But it explained him. People rarely destroy relationships because of one bad night. They do it after feeding the same insecurity for years. "I never tried to embarrass you," I whispered. "I know." His answer surprised me. "I know." Then he looked away. But it happened anyway. For one brief second, I saw the man I had married. The one buried beneath pride, disappointment, and too many bottles. Then he hardened again. "Leave." I zipped the diaper bag. Picked up Emily. Walked downstairs. He didn't help her. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look toward his daughter. As I opened the front door, icy wind rushed inside. Emily whimpered. I wrapped my coat around both of us. Behind me, Ethan said one final sentence. "Don't come back until you learn some respect." The door closed. The lock clicked. That sound stayed with me longer than his words. Outside, the neighborhood was completely silent. Most families were asleep. Televisions off. Porch lights glowing softly. Ordinary lives continuing while mine had just shattered. I sat inside my car without starting the engine. My hands shook too badly to drive. Emily reached up and touched my cheek. She didn't understand what had happened. She only knew her mother was crying. "I'm sorry," I whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry." Not because I believed I had failed. Because every parent wishes they could protect their child from every painful memory. That night, I couldn't even protect her from the cold. I drove to the only 24-hour pharmacy nearby. The parking lot was brightly lit and almost empty. I parked beneath a security camera. Somehow that made me feel safer. Emily finally fell asleep in her car seat. I called Ethan. No answer. I texted, "Please unlock the door, we can discuss this tomorrow." No reply. 30 minutes later, I called again. Straight to voicemail. Then I noticed something strange. He had turned off his phone. Not ignored me. Turned it off. He had no intention of changing his mind. At 12:48 a.m., I called my younger sister Megan. She answered on the 4th ring. "Claire, I'm sorry for waking you." "What happened?" I couldn't speak. She immediately knew. "Where are you?" "The pharmacy parking lot." "I'm coming." She arrived 25 minutes later wearing sweatpants, slippers, and an oversized hoodie. She didn't ask questions. She simply opened my car door, wrapped her arms around me, then carefully kissed Emily's forehead. "You should have called sooner." I kept thinking. "I know." She nodded. "You kept thinking he'd calm down." I looked away. She was right. Hope often survives long after evidence disappears. Megan lived in a small apartment. Only 1 bedroom. She insisted Emily and I take it. For the next 5 days, she slept on her own couch without complaining once. Those 5 days changed everything. Monday morning, I contacted Human Resources at work. My manager, Susan, invited me into her office. I intended to explain only that I needed emergency leave. Instead, I cried. For the first time since that night. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Susan walked around her desk. Closed the blinds. Handed me tissues. Then waited. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer clichés. When I finished explaining, she said something I'll never forget. You've spent 8 years solving everyone else's financial emergencies. She squeezed my shoulder gently. Let us help solve yours. The company approved 2 weeks of paid emergency leave before I even completed the paperwork. 3 co-workers organized meals without telling me. Another quietly dropped off baby supplies worth nearly $400. No speeches, no pity. Just practical kindness. It reminded me that families aren't always connected by blood. Sometimes they're built through consistent respect. Meanwhile, Ethan never called. Not once. No apology. No question about Emily. Nothing. On the 3rd day, a mutual friend mentioned seeing him at a sports bar. Laughing. Watching football. That information hurt less than I expected. Something inside me had already shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was observing. And observations are much calmer than hope. By the 5th morning, I had contacted an attorney. Collected copies of financial records. Opened a separate bank account. Requested temporary custody paperwork. Every task felt strangely peaceful. Pain had transformed into procedure. Around 3:30 that afternoon, while Emily napped beside me on Megan's couch, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hello. Silence. Then a man's voice. Low. Careful. Mrs. Harper. Yes. I need you to listen carefully. Who is this? I can't tell you my names. My heart began beating faster. If you want the truth about your husband. He paused. You don't go back to that house. Before I could ask another question. The call disconnected. I stared at the phone screen long after the call had ended. Unknown number. No voicemail. No message. Just 23 seconds that suddenly made my entire situation feel even more complicated. Megan noticed my expression as she walked into the living room carrying 2 mugs of tea. What happened? I replayed the conversation word for word. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat down slowly. Do you think someone is trying to scare you? I don't know. I'll warn you. I don't know that either. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, Megan asked the question neither of us wanted to consider. Cleus, how well do you really know Ethan? It sounded like an unfair question. After all, we had been together for 7 years. Married for 4. Shared a home. Shared bills. Shared dreams. Had a daughter together. But the more I thought about it, the less certain I became. There were entire parts of Ethan's life I had never questioned. Weekend fishing trips. Late-night calls from old co-workers. Cash withdrawals he described as helping a friend. None of those things had seemed unusual at the time. Marriage often runs on trust more than investigation. That evening, I locked every door in Megan's apartment. Not because I believed someone was following me. Because uncertainty makes ordinary precautions feel important. Around 8 o'clock, my attorney called. Her name was Linda Foster. Calm, methodical, the kind of person who never wasted words. I reviewed the information you sent. Okay. Claire, I have one question. Go ahead. When your husband forced you out, did he threaten your safety? No. Did he threaten your daughter? No. He simply removed you from the home. Yes. She paused. Legally, that's still extremely serious. Hearing someone describe the situation objectively had an unexpected effect. For 5 days, I had been replaying the emotional side of that night. Linda reminded me there were practical realities too. Marriage wasn't just promises. It involved responsibilities. And responsibilities don't disappear because someone drinks too much. We'll request temporary custody. What about the house? You contributed to the mortgage. For almost every payment. We'll document everything. I thanked her after nearly 40 minutes. When the call ended, I looked at the stack of folders beside me. Tax returns, mortgage statements, bank records, insurance documents. For years I had organized every financial detail in our household. Ironically, those same records would now protect me. The next morning began quietly. Emily laughed while trying to feed pieces of banana to her stuffed rabbit. Watching her smile reminded me why I couldn't allow anger to consume me. Children don't need perfect parents. They need emotionally available ones. I promised myself that Ethan's choices would not become Emily's emotional inheritance. At 11 that morning, another unexpected call arrived. This time from Ethan's mother. Margaret. She had always been polite toward me. Never especially warm. Never cruel. Just reserved. Claire. Hello. I heard you've been staying with Megan. Yes. A long silence followed. I don't know exactly what happened. I think you do. Another silence. Then she sighed. He came here Sunday. I waited. He was drunk. Not surprising. He told us you left him. I almost laughed. I left because he threw me out. I believe you. Those 3 words caught me completely off guard. You do. Claire. Her voice sounded tired. I raised Ethan. I know what alcohol does to him. It was the first time anyone from his family had acknowledged it openly. She continued quietly. He wasn't always like this. I know. He started believing that every setback was proof life had cheated him. I listened carefully. Parents often understand their children better than spouses do. He compared himself to everyone. His cousins, friends, neighbors, even strangers. If someone bought a larger truck, he felt like a failure. If someone received a promotion, he felt humiliated. If someone earned more money, he convinced himself the world was unfair. Eventually, that comparison reached his own marriage. I'm sorry, Margaret whispered. I should have pushed him to get help 2 years ago. Her apology felt genuine. Not because she accepted blame. Because she accepted reality. Before hanging up, she said something unexpected. If he contacts you. Yes. Don't meet him alone. Those words lingered with me. Not because I believed Ethan would become violent. Because even his own mother no longer trusted his judgment. Late that afternoon, Linda called again. We've filed the emergency custody request. Thank you. There's one more thing. What is it? Your husband hasn't responded to any legal notices. He probably thinks I'll come back. Perhaps. She hesitated. But people who believe they're completely in control often ignore problems until they become impossible to fix. That described Ethan perfectly. For years he postponed difficult conversations. Ignored overdue bills. Delayed doctor appointments. Convinced himself tomorrow would somehow solve yesterday. Tomorrow finally arrived. It simply didn't solve anything. The following morning I decided to return to the house. Not alone. Linda had arranged for an off-duty police officer to accompany me while I collected essential belongings. As our car pulled into the driveway, my chest tightened. Everything looked exactly the same. The flower pots I had planted in spring. Emily's tiny plastic swing. The porch light I always forgot to replace. Ordinary objects. Extraordinary memories. The officer knocked firmly. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. He may be at work. I don't think so. I still knew Ethan's habits. If he had been drinking heavily all week. Morning wasn't his strongest time. After confirming we were legally allowed to enter, the locksmith opened the front door. The house smelled stale. Beer, old pizza, unwashed dishes. Curtains still closed. Sunlight barely reached the hallway. The living room looked almost untouched. Except, Emily's toys were gone. Not packed. Thrown into a cardboard box near the garage door. As if someone had been clearing away evidence that a child ever lived there. I swallowed hard. The officer quietly looked away, giving me privacy. I walked upstairs. Our bedroom was a disaster. Drawers open. Clothes scattered everywhere. Several empty whiskey bottles stood on the dresser beside our wedding photograph. The frame had fallen face down. I picked it up. The glass was cracked diagonally across both our faces. I didn't know whether it had fallen accidentally, or whether Ethan had thrown it. Either way, it somehow reflected reality perfectly. I packed only what Emily and I truly needed. Clothes, medical records, baby keepsakes, family photographs, my father's old watch, the blanket my mother knitted before Emily was born. As I opened the filing cabinet in the study, something caught my attention. One folder was missing. Not random papers. One very specific folder. Mortgage documents. I frowned. Everything else remained. Insurance. Taxes. Investment statements. Only the mortgage records had disappeared. The officer noticed my expression. Problem. Someone removed paperwork. Important. Very. Before I could think further. His radio crackled. He listened for a moment. Then turned toward me. Mrs. Harper. Yes. There's someone outside asking for you. I looked through the window. A black sedan had stopped across the street. A man in his early 60s stood beside it. Grey hair. Dark overcoat. Leather briefcase. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking directly at me. The officer studied him carefully. Do you know him? I shook my head. No. The man raised one hand politely. Not waving. Simply indicating he wished to speak. Then he said the sentence that made every anonymous phone call suddenly feel real. Mrs. Harper, I've been trying to find you for almost a week. I instinctively stepped back from the window. Every instinct told me to be careful. 5 days earlier, I had believed my biggest problem was my marriage falling apart. Now strangers were looking for me. Anonymous callers were warning me. Missing paperwork had appeared inside my own house. Nothing felt ordinary anymore. The officer glanced at me. You don't have to speak with him. I know. Your choice. I looked outside again. The older man hadn't moved. He wasn't impatient. He wasn't trying to come inside. He simply waited. There was something strangely respectful about that. Stay with me, I told the officer. Of course. We walked outside together. The autumn wind carried dry leaves across the driveway. Emily was asleep in her stroller beside the patrol car, completely unaware that adults were quietly changing the course of her future. The older man stopped several feet away. He removed his gloves before extending his hand. My name is Daniel Brooks. The name instantly brought back the question the police officer had asked days earlier. Mrs. Harper, are you absolutely certain you don't know anyone named Daniel Brooks? I hadn't. Until now. I don't believe we've met. We haven't. His voice was calm and measured. I wish the circumstances were better. I didn't shake his hand. Not yet. How do you know my names? I've known your husband's name for nearly 3 years. That wasn't the answer I expected. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? He looked toward the police officer. I'd rather explain everything at once if that's acceptable. The officer nodded. I'm staying. I expected that. Daniel didn't object. That immediately lowered my guard a little. People with bad intentions rarely welcome witnesses. He opened his briefcase carefully. Instead of pulling out money or contracts, he removed photographs. Several photographs. He handed me the first one. It showed Ethan standing beside another man outside what looked like a warehouse. The picture had a date printed in the corner. 18 months earlier. I frowned. I've never seen this. I didn't expect you had. Another photograph. Same warehouse. Different day. Another. Then another. 5 in total. Each one showed Ethan meeting different people. None of them looked familiar. What is this? Daniel answered carefully. My company owns commercial properties across 3 states. I waited. One of those warehouses was repeatedly damaged. Damaged. Equipment disappeared. Construction materials vanished. Vehicles entered after business hours. We hired private investigators. He paused. They photographed everyone coming and going. I looked again at Ethan's face. He looked younger. Healthier. Sober. What are you saying? I'm saying your husband associated with people who were stealing construction materials. I felt the blood drain from my face. No, I'm not accusing him of theft. He chose his words very carefully. I'm saying he was present. Those 2 statements were very different. The officer quietly asked, was he charged? Daniel shook his head. No. Then why are you here? Daniel looked directly at me. Because 6 months ago the investigation ended. And everyone involved either cooperated or disappeared. The word disappeared hung in the air. I don't understand. Ethan refused every request to answer questions. He never told me. I know. How? Daniel sighed. Because investigators interviewed several neighbors. None of them believed you knew anything. I stared at him. So why contact me now? Because after what happened 5 days ago. He glanced toward the house. Someone decided you were no longer protected. That sentence made even the police officer straighten. What does that mean? The officer asked. Daniel reached into his briefcase one final time. This time he produced a sealed envelope. Inside, mortgage documents. My missing mortgage documents. I looked up immediately. Where did you get these? They were mailed anonymously to my office yesterday morning. What? There was no return address. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Every missing paper from my filing cabinet was inside. Nothing else. Just those documents. Attached was a single handwritten note. 3 words. She deserves better. No signature. No explanation. No fingerprints according to Daniel. Just those words. The officer frowned. Someone entered the house. Daniel nodded. Most likely. And removed only these. Yes. I couldn't understand it. Why would anyone do that? Daniel looked at me with genuine sympathy. Because those documents prove exactly how much of that house you paid for. Silence. I slowly flipped through the paperwork. There they were. Every mortgage payment. Every electronic transfer. Year after year. My salary. My account. My contributions. Nearly 70% of every payment. Daniel continued quietly. If those papers disappeared, it would become much harder to immediately establish your financial contribution. I looked toward the house. For the first time, I wondered whether Ethan had actually taken them, or whether someone else had beaten him to them. The officer asked the obvious question. Mr. Brooks? Yes. Who made the anonymous phone call to Mrs. Harper? Daniel smiled faintly. It wasn't me. Then who? I honestly don't know. He paused. But whoever mailed these documents, I wanted to make sure she wasn't left with nothing. For several moments no one spoke. Finally I asked, "Why are you helping me?" Daniel looked toward Emily sleeping peacefully in the stroller. Then back at me. When my daughter was 2 years old, my wife left in almost identical circumstances. His voice remained calm. But I wasn't there to help her. A long silence followed. I promised myself, if I ever saw another woman standing where she once stood, I wouldn't look away. There was no dramatic music. No shocking revelation. Just one parent recognizing another parent's fear. Sometimes kindness enters your life through complete strangers. The officer finally broke the silence. I think we should officially document everything. I agree, Daniel replied. So do I. As we gathered the papers, Daniel handed me a business card. If you ever need copies. I scanned every page. I accepted it. Thank you. He nodded once, then closed his briefcase. Before leaving, he stopped beside the patrol car. Without looking back, he quietly said, "Mrs. Harper." Yes, the anonymous caller was right. I waited. Whatever happens next, don't go back. Then he got into his sedan and drove away. I watched until the car disappeared around the corner. Only then did I realize something. For the first time in 5 days, I wasn't thinking about what Ethan had taken from me. I was thinking about what I still had. My daughter, my career, my integrity. And now, that evening after returning to Megan's apartment, I spread every document across her dining table. Mortgage statements, bank transfers, property tax receipts, home insurance payments. There were 147 pages in total. For years they had been nothing more than routine paperwork. Now they told the story of our marriage more honestly than either Ethan or I ever could. Megan sat beside me with a calculator. You really paid this much. I never added it all together. She did. Quietly. Methodically. After nearly 20 minutes, she looked up. Claire. What? You paid just over $291,000 toward that house. I stared at the number. Not because I was thinking about money. Because I was remembering every sacrifice behind it. The vacations we postponed. The overtime I accepted. The weekends I spent preparing quarterly reports while Emily napped beside my desk. None of those decisions had felt extraordinary at the time. They were simply what families did. Or what I believed families did. That night after Emily fell asleep, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. His first call in 6 days. I watched it ring. Then stop. A text appeared. Can we talk? I didn't answer immediately. 10 minutes later, another message arrived. You embarrassed me by involving lawyers. Not, how's Emily? Not, I'm sorry. Not, are you both safe? His first concern was embarrassment. I placed the phone face down. Megan glanced at the screen. "You're not replying." "Not tonight." "What changed?" I smiled faintly. I finally stopped confusing guilt with responsibility. The next morning Linda called. "The temporary custody hearing has been scheduled." "When?" "Thursday. 3 days away." My stomach tightened. I've never been inside a courtroom. "You'll be fine." She paused. "I have one question." "Okay. Has your husband attempted to see Emily?" "No." "Has he asked about her health?" "No." "Has he offered financial support?" "No." Linda sighed quietly. "Keep records of every unanswered responsibility." "I have. I suspected you would." Years of accounting had taught me one valuable lesson. Memories fade. Documentation doesn't. Thursday arrived cold and grey. The courthouse wasn't intimidating the way television portrays it. It was surprisingly ordinary. People carrying folders. Parents holding children's hands. Lawyers drinking coffee. Life continuing through paperwork. Ethan arrived 15 minutes late. He looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled. His beard untrimmed. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. For one brief moment, I saw the man I'd once worried about. Not the husband who had thrown us out. Just a tired human being whose life had begun collapsing under the weight of his own decisions. He looked at Emily. For the first time since that night. She looked back curiously. Then hid behind my leg. Children remember more than adults assume. He took one hesitant step forward. "Claire." Linda gently touched my arm. "I'll handle this." She stepped between us. "If you have something to say, direct it through counsel." Ethan looked frustrated. "I just want to talk." Linda answered calmly. "You had 6 days." He lowered his eyes. There was no argument. No dramatic confrontation. Only consequences arriving quietly. Inside the courtroom, the hearing lasted less than 40 minutes. The judge asked practical questions. Who had been Emily's primary caregiver? I had. Who maintained stable employment? I did. Who currently provided housing? I did, with Megan's temporary assistance. Then came the question that changed the atmosphere. "Mr. Harper." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Did you remove your wife and 1-year-old daughter from the marital home at approximately 11 o'clock in the evening on November 11th? Ethan remained silent for several seconds. Finally, "Yes." "Did you provide alternative accommodation?" "No." "Did you attempt to contact your daughter during the following 6 days?" Another pause. "No." The judge wrote something. No lecture. No anger. Just ink on paper. Sometimes accountability sounds like a pen moving across a page. Temporary primary custody was granted to me. Ethan received supervised visitation until further review. Outside the courtroom, he finally managed to speak with me. Not alone. Linda remained nearby. I didn't think it would go this far. I looked at him quietly. "You locked the door." "I was drunk." "You stayed sober for 6 days afterward." His shoulders dropped. There was nothing left to argue. Some truths don't require raised voices. He looked toward Emily again. "I miss her." "I believe you." Those words surprised him. "I do believe you. But missing someone isn't the same as protecting them." He closed his eyes briefly. "I know." It was the most honest sentence he'd spoken in months. As he walked away, I didn't feel victorious. Only sad. Not because I wanted him back. Because every broken family begins with ordinary people making one avoidable decision after another. There is rarely a single explosion. Just hundreds of small cracks nobody repairs until the whole foundation gives way. A week later, I returned to work. I expected awkwardness, whispers, pity. Instead, everyone simply welcomed me back. Susan left a small note on my desk. One meeting at a time, one day at a time, welcome home. No dramatic speech. Just quiet support. Over the next 3 months, something unexpected happened. Without constantly managing Ethan's emotional ups and downs, life became calmer. Emily slept through the night again. I laughed more. I cooked actual dinners instead of rushing through every evening. Peace felt unfamiliar at first. Then it became normal. One Friday afternoon, the company's regional vice president asked me to his office. I assumed another budget review. Instead, he smiled. "We've been evaluating leadership candidates." I listened carefully. "We'd like you to oversee financial operations for all 5 regional branches." I blinked. That's a significant promotion. The position came with a 28% salary increase. A larger team. More responsibility. I accepted. Not because of the money. Because for the first time in months, someone was recognizing me for what I could build instead of criticizing me for what I had achieved. That evening, I picked Emily up from daycare. She ran toward me with tiny, unsteady steps. "Mama." I lifted her into my arms. She laughed so hard that everyone in the lobby smiled. In that moment, I realized something profound. The safest place I had promised her wasn't a house. It wasn't a marriage. It wasn't an address. It was me. As long as I remained steady, she would always have a home. Months later, the divorce was finalized. The house was sold. The financial records Daniel Brooks had preserved ensured that the division reflected the reality of who had paid for it. No dramatic courtroom victory. Just fact. Verified. Documented. Recognized. I never learned who made the anonymous phone call. Perhaps I never will. Maybe it was someone who regretted staying silent. Maybe it was someone who simply believed a mother deserved a fair chance. Whoever it was, one anonymous act of courage prevented another injustice. Today, when people ask how I survived that chapter of my life, I don't tell them about court hearings or legal documents. I tell them about systems. Healthy relationships are systems. Trust is a system. Respect is a system. Responsibility is a system. When those systems are ignored day after day, one terrible night doesn't create the collapse. It merely reveals that the foundation has already been failing for a long time. And when someone quietly chooses integrity instead of revenge, the strongest system of all begins to rebuild itself, one honest decision at a time. Tell me in the comments, if you had received that anonymous phone call, would you have answered it or ignored the unknown number? I'd genuinely like to hear your thoughts. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to Revenge Cold Stories, and I'll see you in the next one.